Allie. I work as a research assistant in the College of Pharmacy at The Ohio State University. My PI's name is Craig McElroy, and so I work in the McElroy group. And so what our lab is doing is we're trying to find treatment for chemical warfare nerve agent poisoning. So that's poisoning from anything from like sarin gas, like that was used in the Syrian Civil War, or even, new Russian like Novichok series that were used to poison Alexei Navalny. And so what we're doing is just trying to develop some drugs to kind of determine if there's a better way to treat nerve agent poisoning or poisoning from pesticides that cause similar effects. Most of the time, as a research assistant, that basically just means that 40 hours a week I'm doing something lab related. So I'm in the lab working on an experiment or something. And so a couple of the roles that I have right now are like trying to express and purify a protein that's going to help us in some of our studies that we're working on. I'm also working on doing some chemical synthesis, trying to come up with some drug treatments. We're also starting a new project, which I'm really excited about, where we're actually going to be seeing if we can find a treatment for poisoning from botulinum neurotoxin, which is the protein that causes botulism. And there's really no FDA approved treatment for it. So I'm actually really excited to see, if we can come up with anything that will be effective. I've learned a lot about how to manage my time so that I can accomplish all of these, experiments that I'm trying to do in a day where they have weird time intervals that it's going to take. And so I've learned a lot about how to do that, how to manage that. And I definitely have learned a lot more about how chemistry works in a hands-on type of way. Like when I was teaching, it was all like, in theory, this is how it works, and it seems much more straightforward than it is. And then you get into a real-life lab scenario, and you're like, yeah, in theory, that's how that works, but also there's all these other steps, and also a lot of safety precautions that I just was never really aware of. So being, physically in the lab, doing these experiments, and seeing the ways that sometimes it's very robust and things work when you're like, I don't know how that possibly worked. But also some things are really sensitive, and they're like, and micro adjustments, and they're like, nope, not gonna work. So it's been cool to see how real life chemistry actually works. So in research, you use a lot of different types of equipment, and I work in a couple different types of projects where I'm doing some biochemistry and I'm doing some synthetic organic chemistry, and so I use a lot of different types of equipment kind of depending on what I'm working on. And so for the biochemistry side, a lot of the stuff that I use is I'll use something called an autoclave. What that does is it uses heat and steam to sterilize things. So maybe my pipette tips, want to make sure that those are sterilized, there's no contaminants from other microorganisms, so that if I'm working with a bacteria or with a parasite, it's not going to get infected. So I'll use that to sterilize my stuff. I'll use what's called a laminar flow hood or a biological safety cabinet. And so what that does is it basically circulates air in such a way that it doesn't let air from the outside in or the inside out, basically to protect the stuff that's on the inside and to protect me from that stuff as well, in case it's dangerous. And so that's a little bit more on the biochemistry side. I'll also make little agar plates that I'll put my samples onto. I'll grow things in what's called an incubator, which basically maintains the temperature and rotates my stuff around so that it can get some aeration. So it just helps stuff to grow. I'll work with a various amount of glassware so that I can do my reactions in certain containers. Most of the time we use these things called round bottom flasks, and we just put them and let them go for a certain amount of time in a reaction. We'll test reactions as they go by using this technique called thin layer chromatography, which basically separates molecules by how polar they are. And then we'll know if our reaction is finished. After that, we have to purify our stuff, and so we might evaporate the solvents with something called a rotovap or a rotary evaporator. And we also use some kind of chromatography to actually purify our product so that we know it's for sure it's clean. And then we'll test the purity using different like analytical techniques like NMR, which stands for nuclear magnetic resonance. And we also have mass spec, or MS. One frustrating thing about research is that there's a good bit of failure involved with it, and so a lot of the times you'll do something and it won't work, or it maybe will work and you don't know why, and you just have to keep doing it over and over and over again. And it makes you really grateful for the times that you get those occasional wins. But yeah, I mean, even right now I'm like working on this project where I have these parasites that I'm trying to, take a section of DNA and put it in the parasite so that it can express that, protein that the DNA codes for, so I can get the protein out of it. But it has been such a journey trying to get this dang gene into the parasite. So, I mean, even like months of time. And that's, kind of like a regular occurrence. Not always. There are things that I do where I get some wins immediately, and that's really awesome. But that has been tough. And so I think, the struggle in research is that it's really a repeated thing, and you just got to do it, and you got to redo it, and it's got to be replicable, and yeah. My lab has about 15 people in it, something like that. We have like 4 or 5 undergrads that are just either in the College of Pharmacy for like their undergrad or maybe in a different science field. And there are like 3 or maybe 4 postdocs. The postdocs are people who finished their PhD and came here to do research to get some extra experience. Me and another person are research assistants, which means that we aren't yet in grad school or med school or whatever, but still in, the lab doing stuff every day. And then there are like 2 or 3 grad students, and those are the people who are working towards their PhD in medicinal chemistry. And then we'll have my PI, Craig. My future hopes is to do some science outreach, so working with teens in the community to get them exposure to some science education, and especially if we can do some of that in the College of Pharmacy, that'd be really awesome. So I'm hoping to continue on in this lab, start grad school in the medicinal chemistry and pharmacognosy program through the College of Pharmacy at OSU, and I'll stay in the McElroy group and just keep on working with these OP pesticides and maybe even the botulinum neurotoxin, and bring in hopefully some students in a safe way so that they don't get sick from any of the things that we're working with. But we're pretty safe. We know how to have lab safety. But yeah, I'm hoping to keep going with some science outreach and grow my understanding of science and chemistry in the process.